Welcome everybody to today's webinar from the Urban Transitions Alliance, and our topic of today is fostering inclusive and citizen-led climate change adaptation. My name is Rebecca Wessinghage. I work for the ICLE World Secretariat, and I'm also joined by my colleague Olga Horn, who will moderate the question of today's session. I have also the pleasure to introduce other ICLE colleagues we have today with us. This is Burcu Tünsel, the head of circular development in the ICLE World Secretariat. Hi, Burcu. We also have Matteo Bisotto from ICLE Global Communications, and we also are very happy to introduce Kay Roberts from the ICLE USA office. Our topic today is climate change, adaptation, and citizen engagement. So we have brought some questions to guide our conversation today. So how are cities co-creating climate change adaptation programs together with their local communities? How can private property owners be engaged to strengthen adaptation measures? For example, to make sure that not all of the properties are completely sealed with concrete, or that we strengthen the installation of green roofs or green walls. And thirdly, how can adaptation plans and awareness campaigns be designed with an equity lens, meaning that we also make sure that all different communities' needs in the city are considered and represented. Our topic today has been initiated by the city of Katowice. So I'm very happy to welcome Jakob Kulach from the city, who will also give an introduction today on climate change adaptation and community engagement challenges in Katowice. I'm also very happy to welcome our other speakers of the day, Oliver Kroner from the city of Cincinnati, Agnes Schönfelder from the city of Mannheim, and also Duncan Booker from the city of Glasgow. Glasgow is a new city in the Urban Transitions Alliance network, and we're very delighted to have you today. Also, I wanted to quickly share who we have joining, other cities and partners from the Alliance today. So we have Dirk van Brach from the city of Dortmund. We have also Joe Brady from the city of Glasgow. We have Jonathan Gordon from the city of Newark. We have Kelly St. John and Kevin Meindl, both from the city of Buffalo. We have Lisa Lahti from the city of Turku. We have Stefan Rath from the Science Park in Gelsenkirchen, and also Susanne Dippel from the city of Gelsenkirchen. A very warm welcome to you all. And in addition, we have Anje from the DENA, the German Energy Agency, and we will also be joined by some partners from the Ruhr Regional Association today. So again, a very warm welcome, and I would suggest before we dive into today's topic that I give directly the word to Duncan from Glasgow to give us a brief introduction on the transition story of the city and also the equity-focused governance of today. And I will now ask the speakers to switch off the camera so we can have full attention on the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be able to speak to you today. Welcome from Glasgow. Greetings. I look forward to welcoming you all. Oh, if you go back one, please. Rebecca, it's moved forward already. Thank you. That's okay. I'm having to do this a slight distance. I'm really looking forward to welcoming you and your city mayors to Glasgow for COP26 in November 2021. And if there are two key messages Glasgow wants to get to the world and to itself for COP26, then they are simply these. Firstly, that sustainability and social justice must go together. And secondly, that whatever nations pledge, it is cities that will deliver. And our cities manage to be both the location to, but also the solution for many of the world's problems around sustainability. And of course, that fits in very well with today's discussion. And at the heart of all that is a story about transformation, which is something Glasgow has experienced, which I know your cities will have too. Next slide, please, Rebecca. And these two photographs show you Glasgow shifting from being one of the titans of the global industrial age to the city we see here today, seeking to make a cleaner, greener transition away from hydrocarbons, but away from COVID too. Next slide, please, Rebecca. And much of what we're doing is based upon our own previous conversations in Glasgow with our people on the resilience strategy that we developed. And we very quickly became aware that really the basis of a more resilient city is a fairer and more just city, that equality and social justice have to be at the heart of all our discussions, and that whatever the future holds, no matter how uncertain it is, and COVID certainly was not something we'd seen coming, the basis of our resilience has to be a continuing, open and democratic conversation with our people. And climate, of course, and the climate emergency form a key part of that. Next slide, please. We, like many of you, have plans and strategies to look at the climate emergency. On the left of the screen, you see our plan for reducing carbon emissions. But more importantly for today, on the right, you see one of our strategies for climate change adaptation, because we recognise that changes to our local weather are now inevitable and inexorable because of global climate change. We need to protect our people, and particularly our most vulnerable communities, from what that will mean for them. Next slide, please. If you press again, please. There we are. And we very much want to involve that in a broader discussion around place making, about what it is to create high quality places in which people can live and work, move around and enjoy a cultural and leisure life with one another. And the image you see before you is of our former Commonwealth Games athletes village from the Games in 2014, at the heart of which, as you can see, is a sustainable urban drainage system, which looks to ensure that we can make that neighbourhood resilient to the impacts of surface water flooding because of greater rainfall in Glasgow. Next slide, please. But that is not just a debate about bricks and mortar and buildings. It is a debate about people and the places in which they live. And what we try to do in Glasgow is to fit with a broader conversation in Scotland, facilitated by a group called Climate Just, to engage with our people about what this means for them and how we can use the assets that they have on the ground to make our places more resilient. And the picture of on the left of the screen is about a project called Weathering Change, which we've engaged with other partners to talk to our people about what climate means for them, about what the barriers to resilience are and what the assets are they can draw upon. And that's a key discussion here in Glasgow and something I'd like to share with you in due course. Next slide, please. And it is not just about Glasgow and local climate justice and a local conversation. We are keen to look across the world. We have something called the Centre for Climate Justice at one of our universities, which was founded by Mary Robinson as part of the Just Transition to a Safer Planet. And just last year, we held the first global forum on climate justice. So the conversation we need to have is with the world as well as it is with ourselves. As you see on the top of the screen there, it says changing the narrative. We're very conscious in Glasgow that we were once part of a global empire that has left its imprint on the world and which will influence zones of conflict as climate becomes an additional stressor on many parts of the developing world. And so today I'd like to bring to your attention the fact that this is not just a conversation within our cities, but a conversation from our cities and across the world. I've almost run out of my 5 minutes, so my last slide is now coming up. Please, Rebecca. And one final point I want to make. Sometimes we talk as if these conversations are about big agencies and institutions, but they are, of course, always going to need to draw upon our most sustainable and important asset, our communities, our people, in the vibrancy and diversity of their families and communities across the city. And if it's the case that people make Glasgow resilient for my city, I'm sure it's the case that people make your cities resilient too. And I look forward to getting into more of a conversation with you about that. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Duncan, for sharing these insights into policy making in Glasgow. And I think what you shared resonates very well with many of the cities we have present today. I think the question that we all have, or that we will try to dive into, is how actually to have these open and democratic conversations with the communities that you were speaking about. And we'll also be very happy to learn a bit more about the placemaking work in Glasgow, maybe at a future opportunity. Now, I would like, without further ado, to really dive into the topic of today, the climate change adaptation, with including local communities and learning from the city of Katowice how adaptation and also community engagement in adaptation is tackled in the city. So Jakub, we would like to invite you to share your screen with us.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Jakub Kułach and I am a worker of the City Hall of Katowice. I work in the Energy Management Office, which is the special structure in the City Hall of Katowice that is focused mainly on the energy management and energy supply for the public buildings in Katowice and also for the city. And my presentation will be about the climate change adaptation strategy and the community engagement. So short introduction about the city. The Katowice is the city in the Silesia region. In the past, it was the city with the heavy industry and mining. And now, for the last years, it changes to the city full of services and the green city, because this is the 10th large city in Poland. And now it's a big business center. And although it's a very big city in Poland, the 50% of the city area is a green area, full of the parks and forest. Okay. So this is about, as I spoke before, the 50% of the city is covered by the green areas. And on the map on the left bottom corner, you can see the urbanized area and the green areas that is in the city. And please go to the next slide. And about the climate change adaptation plan for the city, the Katowice has adopted the plan in 2019. This is one of the 44 plans for the largest city in Poland. The document describes not only the structure of the city, the climate conditions, and the possible threats, but also the mitigation and adaptation actions with the certain indicators for the monitoring process. And the plan focuses mainly on improving condition and enlarge green areas and water retention. And also the pro-ecological education for the citizens, which I show you the few examples in my presentation. So please go to the next slide. And as a result, in the plan, we have developed specific maps with the threats. And on this slide, you can see the map on the left with distribution of the heat islands in the city. The red one are the biggest heat islands. And you can see the difference between the urbanized area and the green area. In the city, the lowest temperature we can achieve on the green areas. And on the right side is the hydrological hazard with the terrain with the highest and the very high risk of flood. And please to the next slide. And in this part of the presentation, I would like to show you some projects that are ongoing in the city to face the climate changes. And first one is the big project of building the underground water tanks with a combined capacity of over 9,000 cubic meters. And along with the construction of the water tanks, city provides modernization of the rainwater drainage system. This will be 13 large underground water tanks, and some of them are already being constructed. And on the next slide, you can see the smaller tanks. These are the tanks focusing on the small retention. This is the project We Catch the Rainwater, and was initiated by the city institution by installing small water tanks at the municipal housing buildings. So, and you can see the two types of these water tanks. On the right, the typical, let's say, barrel, and on the left side, the more design one adopted to the building elevation or the garden that is next to it. And on the next slide, the other project in the city, this is the green roofs. And in the city we have the several buildings that has the green roof on them, and the biggest one and the most impressive are on the International Congress Center and the Silesian Museum, and the total surface of this of the green roofs on these two buildings are over 15,000 square meters. The next project that Katowice is doing for the climate change adaptation is to improve the adaptation potential of the green areas and use drought-resistant plants. One of the most popular action is planting meadows, in Polish siejemy łąki kwietne, and plant a tree, which is about planting a tree in the certain parts of the city where the citizens want to have more trees. They use the special application, and one of the newest, which is from the last month, it's adopting flower planters. This is the action where the citizens can adopt the planter and plant some plants inside them to make greener areas right next to their housing. The other big project is on the next slide, please. The park revitalization program. The revitalization of the green areas with increasing the adaptation potential. This is the big project that costs a lot of millions of euro, and it's not only to make new alleys and new lawns, but also to plant some drought resist plants, and also to increase the potential of collecting the rain. And on the picture on the right, you can see the artificial dry river. This is the open space tank when the rainwater can be stored. And on the next slide, we have the example of the revitalization of the water areas, because in the city we also have a quite number of ponds, and the largest projects that will be in the next years developing, it's revitalization of the Five Ponds Valley in the part of the Katowice. And it will be the revitalization that includes the destination of the bathing place, walking and cycling paths, resting places, and recreation areas for the children. On the other slide, you can see the example of our ecology project. This is the creation of the Ecology Education Center in one of the districts, Katowice Murski. This is the big garden that is placed next to the high school, which is open for the children and also for the local residents. On the next slide, you can see one of the adaptation actions. It's to install the water curtains in the city center. And as a new project, it's to build water playgrounds in the Katowice, which is very popular during the summer, and currently using also the participation budget in the city. We have 3 those water playgrounds, and the 4th is under construction. And the last part of the presentation is about how to involve the citizens in the city, because lots of these projects are mainly provided and by the city hall, but there are a very large number of the projects that can be done by the citizens, and how to involve them to make it more. So in the city of Katowice we have a special structure and special project. It's the Kato Obywatel. This is the project that is focusing on the citizen involvement in creation of the clean, aesthetic, green, and safe city. And the Kato Obywatel project is focused on the many small actions that the citizen can do to make the better place and to make the better city. And from the last year, we have the Kato Citizen of the Year, which is the jury is selecting the most active residents in the 3 categories: cleaning up the city, repairing the city, and making the city greener. And on the next slide, I can show you the what we achieved creating this program. It's planted 600 trees, and using the app, the planted tree, we are planned to do it 300 more. Repaired 11,000 defects reported in the app in the infrastructure, safety, and greenery. So 20,000 square meters of the meadows in the city center, and reduce lawn moving of the next 50,000 square meters, and adopted over 40 planters in the city, which is, as I said, the new project. I would like also mention the 2 other things about involving the citizens and informing. And on the next slide, as the city for the COP24, we've created the handbook ABC for the climate, which is the special handbook for the elder residents about the information about climate changes and how they impact the quality of life. And handbooks contains also information about the climate summit, why it's important and what is the climate summit about. And also about the green policies and energy, water saving, waste segregation, and other projects in the city. And one of the project and one of the type of informing, which will be on the next slide, is creating the Municipal Energy Center, which is part of my office. It was opened in 2018, and this is the center open for the residents of the Katowice, but not also we have residents from the other cities, when they can seek information about the donation of the modernization of the heating system, installing renewable energy sources like photovoltaic panels and solar panels. And also, as the Municipal Energy Center, we provide the educational activities and informing campaigns about the climate changes, but mostly on the air quality. And one other way of informing the citizens is the page. We have the special page on the katowice.eu on the next slide. When we have the special sub-page, it's called the Miejskie Centrum Energii. When we have described it also the climate actions and the climate projects within the city. And as a summary, on the next slide, I would like to tell about the estimated cost of implementing the plan and all these educational actions. It's approximately 370 million euros. And some of the activities has been justified in the current budget because some tasks overlap with the current strategic documents in the city, because it's the climate adaptation plan is not only strategic document in the city, it's one of the few documents, and some of the tasks are divided between them. And as the city, we are preparing to make the one common document, which will be the Sustainable Energy and Climate Action Plan, the SECAP, that will be developed, we hope, in next year. I think it's all I wanted to tell about. So thank you for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.
Thank you, Jakub. And again, sorry for the technical issues in the beginning.
No problem. I have also. So.
Thank you for presenting the different greening projects of the city, water retention, and in the end, what you shared about the citizen engagement or the citizen focused projects, I think was really interesting. I took away the award system and the citizen related projects that were run by social media, encouraging citizens to actually be active in their own communities. The information part where you created the handbook, but also with the energy center, the physical meeting space, and also a web space for people that can maybe not access or don't have the time to access the physical space. I think this system is something that we also see in the city of Dortmund. And it will be interesting to discuss a little bit how this is taken in other cities. I want to open the floor now to see if there are any direct questions already to the presentation. Maybe Olga has something from the chat.
Yeah, 1 second. So Kelly was asking who was involved in shaping the mission and goals of the Katowice project and how the citizens being selected and what the process is. So Jakob, do you have any insights on that?
Yes, the citizens in the Katowice project are not selected. All the citizens in the Katowice that are interested to make the city better and greener can join the Katowice project. So we very encourage the citizens to make very large groups, and the more citizens will join the project, the more actions we could take as the Katowice project.
Mm-hmm. And I think Kelly also had a follow-up question to want to hear more about the social media engagement work. I mean, Jakob, I guess it's not necessarily your field of work, but maybe if you could share some insights on that.
We have several social media pages. The Municipal Energy Center is one of them. Mm-hmm. We also have the dedicated Katowice website, the official city website, and the Good Climate, which is the site that was created specially for the educational events for the COP24. And we adopted this page to share the news about the climate changes, climate adaptation, and the city projects that are related to the climate. We have some citizens that they are very engaged in sharing this news and are very willing to participate in the projects. But we also have these are not big pages with a lot of users, but we are trying to make the best.
Of course. Great, thank you so much. Kelly, I hope this answered your questions. Otherwise, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask any follow-up question. Okay. Otherwise, we also have another question coming in from Sebastian Schlecht from the city of Essen. So he's wondering, if you did any risk assessment and included it in the financing strategies. Sebastian, maybe you want to elaborate on what exactly you're referring to with respect to the risk assessment.
I think it's about the financing of all the projects and all the strategies. I must say that most of the projects are the investment projects about the revitalization of the parks and the water areas, the water parks, are mostly done thanks to the European projects and European funds. And for the all projects that I mentioned, we have the funds from the previous perspective. And on the ecological education, these are the funds from the city, so it's not a risk that we won't have any money for the educational projects, if this was the question.
Great. Sebastian, if there is any follow-up question, feel free to just respond in the chat, and maybe we can then also pick it up later during the discussion at the end of the all the presentations.
Thank you, Olga. I think this is, is also good for a first round of questions. If you have any more to Jakub, as Olga just said, please type them in the chat. And I would like to directly give the word now to Oliver Kroner from the city of Cincinnati. And Ollie, we will now try again to share the screen with you so you can bring up your presentation. Hi, Ollie, good to see you again.
Morning.
Maybe I would suggest that you also switch off your camera because we cannot hear you so well, and it might improve the connection if you switch off the camera and only have the audio on during the presentation.
You cannot hear me well?
It's a little bit interrupted, so
Sure, just a moment, working on the screen.
Sure.
Are you able to see my screen? Any better?
I can't see it yet. Okay, should I try to bring it up also on my computer? Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect. Now we can see.
Okay, you have my screen. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we're able to hear you well. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Please go ahead.
Thanks. So good morning again, or good afternoon to those in other time zones. I am Ollie Kroner, a sustainability coordinator with the city of Cincinnati, focusing today on some of our citizen-led climate adaptation efforts. I think it's important to note that all of our climate work is citizen-led. Our climate action plan is called the Green Cincinnati Plan, and this is the product of significant community engagement. We held over 30 public meetings around the city. I held meetings in different languages, in churches, at the universities, and ultimately collected over 1,400 different recommendations from our citizens on how to be more sustainable. With those 1,400, we worked with the local universities here to analyze the climate impact and economic impact of the different recommendations. And we distilled that list down to 80 strategies that were ultimately included in the Green Cincinnati Plan. Those strategies touched on each of the systems here with the end goal of reducing our carbon emissions 80% by 2050 and building a more sustainable, equitable, and resilient future for our city. I think I need to talk about what climate change looks like here. So if you're not familiar with Cincinnati, we are in the middle of the US. So we're not a coastal city faced with sea level rise. We're not experiencing droughts and forest fires. What we are experiencing is a significant increase in major storm events. So our scientists measure storm size based on the statistical likelihood that it happens in any given year. And over the last 2 years, we've experienced 8 100-year storm events. So those are storms that are supposed to happen once every 100 years. They cause all sorts of trouble: flash flooding, sewer backups. We have a very old, in fact, the oldest in the US sewer system, and it is a combined sewer system, which means that our stormwater and our raw sewage mix during these major storm events. Unfortunately, when they're hyper-localized storms, that means that our homeowners experience raw sewage in their homes. So the sewers back up and you have a basement full of other people's sewage. Very unfortunate, very expensive, very difficult to manage. We are also a very hilly city. Our nickname is the City of Seven Hills. And when we have these major storms, they can cause the hillsides to become compromised. And we're experiencing landslides across the city. One of the landslides put significant pressure on one of our major water mains that serves the city. So we had to reinforce that that hill in order to protect water service to our people. Currently, we have a landslide that's spilling onto one of the major thoroughfares that connects the east side to the west side of the city. All in all, we spent over $50 million addressing storm events in 2018. We're still calculating the cost of 2019. I think it's also important to note that the money for these repairs has to come from somewhere. And we were scheduled to build a new police station. However, that money had to be redirected to pay for hillside stabilization. So we're at a point where climate disruption costs are directly impacting core governmental services. And like much of the world, we're experiencing heat waves, major heat events where weather becomes dangerously hot. We have a significant impoverished community, many who live in apartments that do not have air conditioning, and we have significant asthma rates across the city. From one neighborhood to another, there's an 88-fold difference in the likelihood that you will experience asthma as a child. That translates to other health implications, including major differences in average life expectancy, up to 25 years now from one neighborhood to another. So more and more scientists are calling heat the most dangerous natural disaster. This is the problem we're trying to understand better. So on the citizen-led side of this conversation, we're engaging in a major urban heat mapping effort right now in a partnership with the National League of Cities and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We have a group of citizen volunteers who will be placing these monitors that you see in the center of the screen on cars and bicycles and traveling across the city in different pockets to collect surface temperatures and air temperatures around the city. So the idea is, with all of this data collected over time, we'll have a very clear map of where this is problematic and where it is not. That lets us begin to micro-target solutions. I'd like to ask you to take a look at these two maps and compare them. On the left, we have a heat map of our city. This is based on satellite imaging one day in September a few years ago. You can see the deep red colors are significant heat and the green colors are cooler temperatures. Almost a 30-degree Fahrenheit difference in temp, which is very significant. Now on the right, we have an estimate of our tree canopy coverage in each neighborhood of the city. You can see that one map is the inverse of the other. Where we have healthy tree canopy, we have cooler temps. Where we have very few trees, we have very hot temps. I also want you to note the magnitude of difference in tree canopy from one neighborhood to another. You see some neighborhoods with almost 70% tree canopy and other neighborhoods with as low as 5%. That's an important equity issue we've come to realize. So we have a variety of strategies. Yes, we know that our tree canopy helps address urban heat issues. It also helps absorb stormwater and slow stormwater runoff, which causes the multitude of problems I already mentioned. However, when we look at that tree canopy map, we come to realize that looking at tree canopy as a city-wide average is not sufficient. That if we're truly focusing on equity, we need to focus on bringing up the minimum canopy percentage in our residential neighborhoods. So in this climate action plan, for the first time, in addition to a 40% citywide tree canopy goal, we added a 30% minimum for residential neighborhoods. So that means our urban forestry efforts now focus on those neighborhoods that are under treed. We also recognize the importance of green space for recreation and for cooling. So we have a goal to allow all residents to live within 10 minutes of a 10-minute walk of a park or green space. Our most recent data show that 82% of citizens do. compared to a 55% national average. So we're working hard to identify where those gaps are and creating green spaces there. We also passed what we call a street tree assessment. So any property owner in the city of Cincinnati pays a small fee annually that funds the planting, tracking, and maintenance of street trees. So we've now planted over 85,000 street trees along the roadways of the city of Cincinnati. Those are great for cooling, for stormwater management. They've been shown to reduce crime. They've been shown to slow traffic in pedestrian areas. So really a winning program. However, they're limited to street trees. And we know that we have other areas that are in need of tree planting also. So we're looking at strategies to plant on private land. The other major shift in our strategy is recognizing that some of our tree species have fallen vulnerable to climate change, and they're struggling to survive in today's climate. So we are being more intentional about which species of trees, selecting from southern growing zones to plant here to anticipate heat and drought in the future. So to plant trees on private property, we launched a program called Relief, where this is basically a tree giveaway program where citizens of Cincinnati can request a tree to be planted on their property. The only requirement is that it has to be visible from the street so we can monitor the success of the program. During the launch of Relief, our public school system reached out and said, hey, we'd love to be a part of this effort and put forward a vision that every student that graduates from Cincinnati Public Schools plants a tree as part of their education. So for the first time this year, we were able to raise money to give to the schools and plant those first trees on school campuses. And then we're working to build a corporate culture around this. So I imagine in your cities, microbrews are booming in popularity. One of our most successful and most popular breweries here is called Mad Tree. Their branding worked well with a major tree planting campaign. So they are funding what will be a massive scale tree planting effort on private property. So we are working to identify parts of the city that it could use trees on private property, and Mad Tree will be funding the Mad Tree planting campaign. And then of course, trees also sequester carbon. So it's important to think about their role in capturing carbon from our atmosphere. We have an 80% carbon reduction goal, but we want to be carbon neutral. So we need significant carbon sequestration strategies. We are looking at programs in other parts of the world, including Sweden, that are focusing on increasing the carbon sequestration capability of urban tree canopy. And collectively, our strategies have been successful. Over the last decade, we've been able to draw down our city's carbon emissions by 18.4%. And when we focus on city government specifically, reduce it by 36.3%. So we think we have a winning formula that we're trying to grow over time. So thank you, Urban Transition Alliance, for featuring Cincinnati today.
Thank you, Ollie, for presenting today and for showing what Cincinnati has in terms of the challenges. So thanks also for being very open on what the city is suffering through climate change, and also how you have tackled together with citizens. I've found the citizen science approach for the heat mapping quite interesting. And of course, the tree canopy, where you are working with both the public institutions in the terms of the street trees, and also the LEAF program where also schools have been engaging. What would interest me is also how private property owners, other than the brewing company that you shared, maybe private citizens, have they been taking up this program well, or how is your experience there?
We planted more trees this year than ever before. It's a combination of resource availability and then getting the word out. And we did an extra good job of getting the word out this year, which meant that we had to raise more resources. So the program is growing in its success, and we want to keep that momentum.
Great, thank you. That's wonderful news, actually. Maybe I just ask Olga if there are any additional questions already coming up.
Yes, we have one from Lisa from the city of Turku. She would be interested to know, which projects and cities in Sweden they've come across in terms of the sequestration projects. And she would also be interested to know whether they had to fight a lot to get the space back to trees, and how this has been viewed by the citizens or not, or whether this has been, I guess, recognized by the citizens that there's a need for this.
To the first question, we've been in communication with the city of Malmo, specifically around soil amendments, biochar specifically, which they have shown accelerates the rate of urban biodiversity and tree growth, and also acts as a tool to help transport the carbon from the tree to the soil. So I think there's a growing appreciation that trees are great for carbon capture, but really the potential is in the soil. And if we can use trees as a tool to transport carbon from the atmosphere to the soil, that will maximize success. So they're doing a number of experiments that are showing fruit. And the other question was, what was the public perception of tree planting? That's a complicated question. I think generally trees are very well received, but as you might imagine, better received in some places than others. Originally, when we saw that some neighborhoods really needed trees and we had resources to plant there, we did a door knocking campaign offering to plant trees, and they were not well received. I think people, residents there saw trees as a nuisance, leaves to rake, sidewalks cracked, branches after storms, etc. So we've had to do some work finding both different locations in those neighborhoods to plant and some outreach to show the net benefit of trees. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it does. And maybe just for another very technical question, so Sebastian wants to know whether you calculate the performance of trees in relation to their growth. I mean, you mentioned that obviously soil is, I guess, one of the key, assets in that respect, but maybe whether you consider this too.
I guess I interpret that question to mean the carbon performance of trees based on their size.
I would assume so.
And yes, older, larger trees are much more successful in capturing carbon than younger trees. And I think part of our internal conversations are how can we do more to protect older trees, because we do not have a tree protection ordinance like some other cities. However, we do have strategy right now to plant on a rapid basis, and we're trying to do so as much as we can. Some areas are better suited for larger trees than others. For example, our street trees are sort of required to be smaller due to space limitations and utility lines that run. But in terms of calculation, yes, diameter base height is a key tool for estimating the carbon sequestration capability of a tree.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, I think Sebastian also wanted to share that in Essen they cut down more trees every year because of drought, heat, and storm-related damages, and that the new trees in their case are actually small and perform low. So just reiterating what you said, that obviously big trees are essentially better at their job, I guess, in this case. Maybe sticking with the tree planting, Kelly.
Thank you, Olga, so much. I would like to move on now, just with an eye to the time, to the next presentation. And please keep the questions that are coming in, and everybody please keep encouraged to send your questions, and we will get back to the remaining questions in the chat after Mannheim's presentation. A big thank you again to Olli for presenting. I just would like to have enough space to also have Mannheim now have their presentation, and then have a bit of a more open discussion covering the three presentations in the end. So thanks for now, and I will share the presentation from Mannheim again from my screen, when we now come to the presentation by Agnes Schönfelder from the Climate Strategy Office in Mannheim.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me all?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Okay. So it's fine. So sorry, because of my bad connection here, you can't see me, but you can hear me, I hope, and you can see the presentation. So I am the head of the Climate Change Strategy Office of the City of Mannheim, and at the same time the CEO of the Climate Action Agency in Mannheim. So in my person included the strategy and also the community work in our city. And I choose the title for the presentation, Facing the Wind of Change, because Mannheim is facing the wind of change, and we want to get the city and its citizens ready for climate resilient transformation. And this aim is connected really with participation. So not only bottom up, also top down, and also cross-departmental. So next slide. And the wind of change is blowing through the city. And that means we have to change not only our strategies, we have to change the culture, and we have to change the structures to have a real transformation in the city. That are the key success factors for change management, and that includes at every time participation. It includes participation to create our Climate Action Plan 2030 we are working on currently, and our Climate Adaptation Plan we adopted last year. And the mission statement Mannheim 2030, that is the localization of the 17 sustainability goals of the United Nations, and our climate urgency plan, which is the answer of the climate emergency call. Next slide. So in the mission statement Mannheim 2030, the city has committed to the goal of to be a climate friendly, climate resilient, and at least a climate neutral city by 2050. And this climate urgency plan includes not only the focus on carbon dioxide reduction, but also on urban green and climate adaptation. Next slide. Concerning the wind of climate change, we have to meet the challenges, especially on heat waves, on heavy rain and storms in the city. So citizens and the environment are really suffering from these extreme weather conditions. And so we do need the resilient people and the resilient environment to be a climate resilient city. Next slide. The climate adaptation plan we have worked out last year together with the administration, together with the politicians and the citizens and the initiatives. So it was a transdisciplinary work in the city. And we conducted workshops and used the big consumer fair, the main market in the town, to interview people about their needs during heat waves and about how can we map heat in the city. We provided a heat map in the internet, and so people could put the places where they really had really suffering from heat. And we informed the people about the effect of urban green, avoiding heat islands in the inner city. Next slide. The measures of the climate adaptation plan was to create a promotion program on greening roofs, facades, and unsealed areas. So we provide consulting and grants via our climate action agency. And we created the campaign Mannheim Makes Room for Green, to be adjusted to green from head to toe. So you can see it in the campaigning pictures. So from head to toe, we are adjusted to be green in the city. Next slide. I don't know if the video works. If it works, you can try it, Rebecca, now to start it, and I will speak. So to promote the campaign, we organized a flash mob on the marketplace and laid out turf early in the morning on 80 square meters in the city. And after citizens who visited us got one of the 400 herbal pots as a present. So it was a really, really good campaign, and a good, we had good press in the media. We had TV on the place, and also the radio, the local radio. So we can go to the next slide. A part of the green campaign was the dwarf rebellion in the front yard. So the Germans will laugh a little bit because Zwergenaufstand has a meaning in Germany. So it is focused on the trend of grey gardens in the front of our houses. So people throwing stones instead of planting plants in their gardens. And we want to do something against that. And on the New Year's event of the city, we built a green and a grey front yard to explain the fortune of the green gardens for climate resilience. And we created a poster, which is in the city, green amazement instead of grey anger. So together we bring color in your front yard. And we give consulting for your colorful front yard from the Climate Action Agency. Next slide. Additionally, we stuffed the people who are angry about the grey gardens in their neighborhood with postcards. So they can throw the postcard in the mailboxes of their neighbors, and so they get information about the green garden, about the fortunes. So we show you the way out of the stone desert. And so it's another kind of watching neighborhood. And so the postcard includes color pencils to paint the garden pictures colorful and give an advice to make the garden greener, and where to get the grant to do that from our promotion program. Next slide. So at the moment, we are working on a heat action plan to meet the needs of the vulnerable groups in times of heat waves. So it's a big participation process over our participation platform, and it is accompanied by a participation concept. So we have a special department in the city only responsible for participation. They accompany our action, our heat action plan. So we have a website, a participation platform, where at the moment is running a survey for the people. So the summer will be hot, so stay cool and give us our tips, give us our advice, your advices, what to do during a heat wave, and which vulnerable groups do you know, and how can we help them to make together a good action plan when the heat wave comes, and it is coming already. And we created this poster to promote the survey in the internet. So we're working together also with our health department, because heat waves are especially a theme for the health department. So it's a good example for transdisciplinary work within the administration. So next slide. So I hope I was within the 10 minutes. I will run very fast. So wind of change is blowing through our cities, and yeah, are you ready for transformation? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Agnes, for sharing these very vivid insights on the different elements of and the different campaigns actually in the field of climate change adaptation, and how you try to incentivize citizens also to kind of monitor each other and look into greening their private properties. One thing that would interest me for the start is Ollie has mentioned that in some communities, even the planting of street trees has not met full buy-in from sides of the citizens. Is that something that you also experience, that sometimes you're not so successful in making people understand the benefits of green space and planting trees and greening maybe their grey gardens? Or has that been taken up more positively?
No. Greening the city and trees are really in the heart of the people. That is what I can easily explain to the people, that green is very important. It is more difficult to explain to them the things to reduce carbon emissions, because they don't smell carbon emissions and they don't feel carbon emissions, but they feel the heat, they feel the storm, and they feel the extreme weather conditions, and they know that all the trees are suffering. We see that. So on our big, beautiful LA get down from not only from storm, also from tree diseases because of the drought and the heat waves. So they really love the green in Mannheim and support that. That is not our difficulty. It's more these front gardens. So the trend of the gray front gardens, yes, that is more our problem.
Okay, thank you for elaborating. Yeah, maybe have there been any other questions coming in through the chat so far?
Yes, there was one question from Kelly. So she's asking whether you worked with any specific community organizations or groups to implement the projects or do the outreach.
Yes, our Climate Action Agency, we are 9 people, and we are really good connected with the initiatives, with the tree initiatives. SOS Tree especially is one of these initiatives, or the Environment Forum is another one. So we are good connected, and we are going into the neighborhoods and organize together workshops and garden festivals to show the people more transparent what we mean with these initiatives and with our green promotion program. We are really good connected.
Great. And just a comment from Dirk from the city of Dortmund, that they also see this trend of, well, I guess, gray front yards in Dortmund, and well, more people sealing their soils instead of, really delving into the green space.
Yeah.
Maybe Dirk, would you like to elaborate a little bit if there is something that you have thought up in Dortmund, how to address this grey garden issue?
Hello together. Yeah, a bit maybe. We have seen this problem too, and a lot of people think it's easier to handle it, but that isn't actually. We have a lot of streets, they are full of the grey garden that have a bad habit around the quartier, because the whole street is quite hot, and we saw this trend often by the elder people, and we haven't a special source to bring it back to the green infrastructure. Is I think the way from Mannheim is a good way to talk with the people or get closer and just make it up with some posters or so. But the key, or we haven't it. There exists also in Germany group at Facebook. They called it Vorgärten des Schreckens, means something moveyard of the what means Schreckens.
Horror, basically.
yeah, horror roof garden, and it's quite difficult. We have to touch the people with good arguments.
Can I just say something additional, Agnes here?
Yes.
Yes, we are not only campaigning with a very colorful way against these gardens of horror. We give also a grant from our greening promotion program. So people who re-green their front yards, they get money for the plants and for the planning of the front yards. So this is also a piece of the postcards that you can get money if you want to have a green garden, yes, from us.
Agnes, can I maybe ask a follow-up question? You said that you use financial incentives to, well, basically get people to regreen their gardens. I think quite a lot of the times people are actually more concerned about the maintenance of them, or especially as, I guess what Dirk, you said, as people grow older, that they might not be able to really upkeep with that. I think that could just be another interesting point to see if there would be some kind of, I don't know, like support that maybe the city in some point could offer to citizens to help them with that, or to connect them with like, I guess agencies that would do it at a low cost or something like that.
Yep, we do that. So the time was too short to speak about that all. So we had this, it's a New Year's Eve, a New Year's event. We had this big stand to explain together with garden specialists which plants you can use that is not so difficult to maintenance the garden, and which is of low cost possible, and so on. So we give that, and at the moment we are writing together with a garden specialist a little brochure about that, how to move to a green garden without many costs and without many work done with that.
Okay, so very comprehensive, thank you.
Great. So if there are no specific questions to Mannheim, maybe we can see if there are questions that came up earlier that Olga would like to bring to the discussion. Otherwise, please also come in with the additional questions. You could either type question in the chat, or I would also like to invite you to unmute yourself if you would like to ask your question directly now to one of the presenters.
Yeah, maybe I just start with the remaining questions that were addressed to Ollie. One has already been answered in the chat box. So Kelly was wondering what exactly Ollie was referring to in terms of the small fee associated with street planting. What type of fee is it, and how is it passed on to residents? And Ollie answered that, their property owners pay 21 cents per frontage foot, and this is something that was passed by the city council and raised about $2 million US per year. And then moving to the next question. So Susanne Dippel from Gelsenkirchen asked, how did you get the word out about the tree planting? Was there a specific ads, social media campaigns, any other outreach that you did at the city level?
Is that addressed to Cincinnati?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So these are all the remaining questions that are addressed to you.
It was an all of the above approach. We did put out a press release, social media outreach, a few calls to friends who we knew had loud voices. There's pretty rapid uptake. So, like I said, we were out of trees relatively quickly, and we had to launch a fundraising campaign to keep up.
Great. Maybe a follow-up question from my side. You mentioned that obviously some neighborhoods have more tree canopy than others, and it is a social equity issue as well. So do you, with these type of campaigns, then target more those neighborhoods that are probably more impoverished and face or are more in need of that, or is that something that you then launch at the whole city level and that residents from all community or from all neighborhoods can apply?
For the relief program, anyone can apply.
Mhm.
The targeted tree planting happens more on the street tree level. So that's where we have city resources to spend on tree planting. Recognizing that private property owners aren't always interested in trees, we've also been focusing on city-owned property in those neighborhoods, basically identifying anywhere we can plant there.
Okay, great.
What we have found is that most tree planting happens during development, or I should say does or does not happen during development. So we're trying to encourage those trees during the development process.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And there was one more question directed to you. In broader terms, do you have projects about energy management that will help to achieve your goal of 80% reduction? Or I guess, could you elaborate on some of the other energy management projects that you're dealing with?
I would say energy management is probably our central strategy. We are a fairly coal-dependent region of the US. So we know that to decarbonize, we have to focus on renewable energy and energy efficiency. So we are currently under contract for what will be the largest city-led solar installation in the US. It's 100 megawatts of solar that will power city government, and then we're working on a tool to deliver that power to the residents of Cincinnati. We also have a program called Warm Up Cincinnati. I think I mentioned we have many poor residents and we have a large rental population. And in the US, I'm not sure if this is different than other cities. In the US, typically you have a property owner who is responsible for upkeep and upgrades to a property, and a tenant who is responsible for the utility bill, which means that there's no economic incentive for energy efficiency improvements. And so we are trying to insert ourselves and some funding we've secured to spend on energy efficiency improvements in low-income families. And then on the corporate side, we have a voluntary challenge program called a 2030 district, where our largest building owners sign up to commit to 50% energy reductions by the year 2030, and then receive coaching on how to get there. So we focus very much on energy.
Great, thank you. There was another question from Lisa, and Lisa, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess it's also addressed to Oliver Kroner. So she asked, or she's interested to know if there was any resistance from the municipality itself or political decision making, especially when it comes for this, I guess, fight for space. And I assume, yeah, in relation to the tree greening.
No, I don't think so. We have pretty strong political will for tree canopy coverage. And maybe, I don't know how this compares to other cities, but we have a fair amount of space. You know, we went through a significant population reduction from the 1950s to about 2010. So we are now growing, but that means that we have a fair amount of park space, a fair amount of vacant lots, a lot of thoroughfares that were carved through the city without tree planting. So we still have a fair amount of space to plant in. There are specific projects where there's a political fight, you know, whether it's one development or one street redesign, but those are small scale compared to the big goals.
Okay, great. Then there's a more general question from Kelly. So do any of the cities presenting today have examples of economic adaptation specifically focused on preparing or equipping city residents with tools, training, opportunities necessary to engage in a green economy? And Kelly, maybe if you want to mute yourself and elaborate on this.
Sure. Thanks, Olga. This is Kelly from the city of Buffalo, New York. I know we only have a couple minutes, so I was just wondering, we heard a lot about, at least from my perspective, what city government is doing from an operational perspective or, you know, an actual built environment perspective. I'm just wondering if anyone's local government has engaged in like workforce development or like green job opportunities or economic transitions around pulling new industry into your city that provide opportunities for green economy work for the future.
I can speak to Cincinnati's efforts. We do this mostly through our contracting. So for example, I mentioned our solar development. Part of that request for proposals included a workforce development clause. So groups that were offering to use union-trained apprentices as part of the development and to include minority-owned businesses receive preferential treatment in the bidding process. So the idea is, as we spend this money, we will train the next generation of solar installers. We do the same thing on our green infrastructure work. Really, we have this clause on all of our city contracting, but the workforce development component plays a stronger role in our green economy work.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Are there any input from the cities in Europe, from the Germans, or also from Turku?
Maybe from Essen?
Great. Go ahead.
Okay. It's interesting that even now after the COVID discussion on economy, our Department for Regional Economy, they relate more on the green economy and the green tech businesses much more as before. So the idea of sustainable economy has now a much higher rate in our city discussion than 6 months before. That's quite an interesting move in that field. I don't know if you really also experience this in other cities.
Is there any direct comment on this? So now how the COVID-19 crisis has basically also, yeah, I guess really pushed for a more, or I guess also green recovery, especially in Europe and in those cities.
Hi, it's Duncan from Glasgow here. That's a very, very strong ambition for the city government here to ensure we move from the COVID emergency to addressing the climate emergency. And we've explicitly called for the establishment in Glasgow of a Just Transition Commission to work with trade unions and skills providers, colleges, universities to make sure that we can provide skilled workforce to develop and grow green jobs, working with local businesses as well as inward investment. So it's a very, very important aspect of our recovery and reconstruction from COVID, but it was also part of our approach to addressing the climate emergency before the current crisis.
Great, thanks. Are there any specific programs that you could maybe highlight in Glasgow where you're already maybe yeah, engaging in workforce development to that end?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, for schools especially, to really encourage STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering and maths with our young people, because that's where many of the skills will be needed for the jobs that we see in the future. Tackling occupational stereotypes, particularly around gender and race, for what that means in terms of engineering jobs and so forth. Drawing upon the city's own heritage as an engineering and heavy industrial city in the light of the kind of products and services needed in the green economy. And in particular, looking at very practical things like how do we use our colleges to support the current generation of boiler engineers as they move away from boilers that use gas to ground and air source heat pumps. How do we transition the current garage mechanics from fixing diesel engines to using hydrogen fuel cells. So very practical things like that, using our colleges and skills providers to ensure we can actually make a very pragmatic transition that attracts investment on the basis of a skilled workforce.
Great, thank you so much. Being mindful of the time, maybe I pass it over to Rebecca to see if we want to address maybe some of the more general guiding questions.
Thank you, Olga. I think most of these questions have actually been addressed during the presentations. Maybe I would like to give Sebastian Schlecht from the City of Essen the last word, because he mentioned something about trees and performance in the chat. And Sebastian, I would invite you to elaborate on that. With that, I would then recommend that we close the discussion for today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rebecca. That's a quite important topic for me. I say performance of green is, it's not only a technical performance, it's also a social performance, and it helps to raise the quality of life and the health and the quality of the real estate, and it is a very important a part in how to develop areas and neighborhoods. If we count on their performance, if we plant a new tree, it is still small and it's growing very slow. So if we need a cooling effect, or if we want to help people because it's a heat island and we plant small trees, they will perform maybe in 10 or in 20 years. Or if the roof pit is not well done, they will never perform, because it will, after 10 years, the tree will maybe die or stop growing, or he will become affected by drought or anything else. So there is quite a big range of how to define the performance and how to find ways to fulfill it. In the end, we can maybe have trees, we have green roofs, we have open spaces, we have drainage system for rainwater or whatever, and in all that together, we can define a performance for our green, which helps the city to be resilient and have quality. And that's what I mean if I say the performance of green or the performance of landscape. And I think that has to be a part in strategies to work on the resilience strategies and climate adaptation.
Thank you, Sebastian.
I hope you understood that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is a great reflection for the end of today. I think we saw very interesting examples on different citizen-focused campaigns on climate change adaptation, but also looked into some of the more technical questions and more technical programs. So I think this conversation, of course, needs to continue. And what has come up during the end of the conversation related to the COVID recovery, the green economy, and also the just transition is, I think, there are also key topics and questions that will also guide our conversations in the Urban Transitions Alliance in the future. So for today, I would like to have a very warm thank you to all who participated, especially, of course, to our speakers. Thanks for this engaging discussion, and I hope, to see you all in our next Transitions Alliance webinar. Then have a good day, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, and see you again.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Bye,
much.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.